Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Back Issue Breakfast Club. I'm your host, Kelly Guentner of Phoenix Sisters Cosplay, and this show is part of the ever-growing Back of the Cereal Box podcast network. Today, we're going to be talking about this book, Black Widow, Web of Intrigue. If you didn't get the hint that we're talking about Black Widow. The Black Widow movie is coming out eventually. We've all been waiting for this movie, or at least most of us have, for ever since she came into the Marvel Universe, if not longer. And this book, I wanted to catch up on some Black Widow reading because I've always loved the character, but there are definitely some holes in my Black Widow history. So my familiarity with the character is more recent, since the 2000s. So this book collects stories from the 70s through the mid 80s. And honestly, these are some of my new favorite Black Widow related stories. They're fantastic. I would recommend this to anyone who like myself maybe hasn't read a lot of her older stuff. So I know there are probably some comic fans who are dying inside. They're like, that's not even that old. But I'm sorry to tell you, it's 2021. So at this point, it's considered older stuff, even though, yes, she has a longer history than this. So this collects 3 stories. The first one is a mini-series written by Ralph Macchio, and most of the art is done by, is penciled by George Perez, and then there's quite a few inkers and colors. Now, I got really excited and had to Google it to make sure it's not that Ralph Macchio, but it's still pretty cool. There's a writer, and then later he would become an editor at through Marvel Comics, who is named Ralph Macchio, and his nickname was the Karate Kid because of, obviously, the Karate Kid. And I have to say, after reading this collection and also reading his foreword, I'm really glad that he had such a hand in the character's development because he has a big respect for the character. He's very talented and he clearly understands the character and just clearly loves Natasha. And so the first story is my favorite in this collection. The first story is centers around Natasha getting a mission from S.H.I.E.L.D. that Ivan, her basically father figure, and I also really loved Ivan in this collection of stories and loved him as a character, loved his relationship with Natasha. So she gets this mission that Ivan, he defected with her, but S.H.I.E.L.D. thinks he's been compromised and gone back to Russia. So she's tracking him down. So this story was written in the 70s, and it's really interesting because it turns things on their head. So it starts out with someone accusing Nick Fury of being a chauvinist because he's like, I don't want Black Widow on this mission. They're like, you're a chauvinist. You just are saying that because she's a woman. And he says, oh no, Black Widow is our best operative. I don't want her on this mission because she's emotionally invested. And then they use that as a great narrative framing technique to dive into her character history, which is really interesting. And this character is really multi-layered. And because, of course, George Perez did the art for this first story, the artwork is absolutely stunning. Action-packed. You have the first scene where Black Widow literally just blows a guy's head off because he breaks in as she's taking it back. And she's like, no one entrusts my bath. And, Natasha, I can relate. I can empathize with that. And that's just bombastic. And then she has 6 assassins tasked with tracking her down, and you just get to see how formidable and smart she is. And so you see her, she's not just punching her ways out of situations, she's thinking her ways out of situations. And that's the theme through all these stories. And that's really great. Next story is a standalone story, and written by Ralph Macchio and Paul Galassi, Chris Claremont, and Michael Golden. Okay, so it's part of this Bizarre Adventures comic, and that's about as 80s-tastic as you can get of a cover. It's I think it's delightful. And the whole story is in just this absolutely stunning black and white art. And the art fits the story. It's very, very noir. I'm not going to spoil too much of the story because it's a shorter one-shot story, but pretty much Natasha is given another S.H.I.E.L.D. mission that turns out to be not quite what she expected. So we'll leave it at that, and you'll have to read it. The story, I feel like, wasn't as character-oriented, but it was definitely a really good spy story. The third story, the art was my least favorite in the collection, but that's just more personal taste. It's not that it was bad art. The third story is the coldest work, but the writing was really good. It was a really emotional story. So here's some of the artwork in the third story. So the third story centers on Natasha's ex-husband, the Red Guardian, who she thought had died, and then she gets some intel that he may be alive and has to go through the motions with that, go through getting compromised and possibly betraying the U.S. to save him. And so you get some more deep dive into who she is as a person. Like, Black Widow really presents herself as a stoic character, but then underneath she's got quite a lot of trauma in her past, quite a lot of deep care for the people she loves. And Ivan, again, is a feature in that story, and the father-daughter relationship between them is just great. It's wonderful. So if you're looking to fill your Black Widow fix while we continue the long wait for the Black Widow movie, cannot recommend this book enough. I think I already said that, but still, you should definitely read it. It's collecting some of her better standalone stories, I think. And also, Jimmy Woo makes an appearance in the first book, and I think some people might be interested in that. I will say there's a little bit of outdated language because the first book is a product of its time, so I wasn't a huge fan of that. So a little bit of racially charged language that wasn't great. And so you kind of have to go in expecting that, and it's not okay, but at the same time, it's a product of its time. It is what it is. When you know better, you do better. And so we know better now. Yeah, I don't have a lot of criticisms of this book, aside from the art, and the third one just was not to my taste. Like, her clothes looked painted on, and the faces were just not my favorite, though they did a good job, or the artist did a good job of capturing expressions. Aside from that, please like and share and subscribe, and again, check out our other shows because we've got some good stuff going on. And please let me know in the comments if you read this book, if you have, what you think of it, and let me know what you're reading. Let me know what you want me to read and review for next week or beyond, and I'd love to hear from you. Just let me know. So hope you all have a good week, and happy reading.